Bismillah Rahman Rahim. I am your instructor Saira Khan for the course Application of Statistics in Psychology with course code 509. This is our 16th lecture. In previous lectures, we learned the statistical methods which are used to compare groups. In the research designs such as repeated measure research design or the independent measure research design. Today we will learn how to find the relationship between the two variables. The research design may be used in such studies in which we have to find the relationship between the two or more variables, the survey or the correlation research design. So today we will learn about the correlation. Correlation uh, is a statistical technique that is used to measure and also to describe the relationship between the two variables. Usually, these variables are simply observed as they are existing naturally in the environment. That is, there is no attempt, researcher have no attempt to control or manipulate these variables. For example, a researcher can check high school records with permission to obtain a measure of each student's academic performance and then survey each family to obtain a measure of income. The resulting data can be used to determine whether there is a relationship between high school grades and the family income. Here we can notice that the researcher is not manipulating any student's grade or any family's income, but is simply observing what occurring naturally. We can notice that a correlation requires two scores for each individual, one score from each of the two variables. The contents which we will cover in today's lecture, we will learn about the correlation in the research situations, and the correlation as describing the relationship. Uh, when describing the relationship in the context of describing the relationship, we will see or learn the direction of the correlation or the relationship, the form of the correlation or the relationship, and the degree of correlation or the relationship. Then we will learn the methods which are used for measuring the correlation. There are many methods to measure the correlation, which are for the different data type. There are different correlation method. Today, we will focus only on Pearson correlation. The other methods with the reference to their data type, we will learn in the upcoming lectures. So we will also see in correlation, we will learn the scatter plot, and on the scatter plot the pattern of the data points, and also learn about the strength of the relationship. Also discuss the coefficient of determination. Then at the end, uh, after learning all the method, all the important terms and the formulas, we will learn how to compute actually the Pearson correlation. Correlation is a statistical method used to measure and describe the relationship between two variables. A relationship exists when change in one variable tend to accompanied by consistent and predictable change in the other variable. So we have to find the correlation. We require two scores for each individual. One score from each of the two variables. One variable, we finding the relationship between two variables. Uh, for each individual, we have to find. We have the scores about the two variables. So we have the two scores for each individual, one score from each of the variable. Usually these two variables are identified as x and y. The pair of score can be listed in the table or can be presented graphically in the scatter plot in this way. हम इसको टेबल में भी इसको इस तरह से टेबुलेटेड कॉलम्स में या टेबुलेटेड टेबल की फॉर्म में भी हम जो है वो रिप्रेजेंट कर सकते हैं, और इस तरह से जो स्कैटर प्लॉट बने हुए हैं ग्राफ पर, तो हम इन्हें ऐसे भी जो है वो डिस्प्ले कर सकते हैं. In the scatter plot, the values for the x variable is listed on the horizontal axis, and the y values are listed on the vertical x. This is the vertical x. जब हमने ग्राफ्स को पढ़ा था तो हमने बहुत तफसील से इसको देखा था कि किस तरह से हॉरिजॉन्टल और किस तरह से ये वर्टिकल एक्सेस हैं किसी भी ग्राफ के. ईच इंडिविजुअल इज प्रेजेंटेड बाय द सिंगल पॉइंट इन द ग्राफ. ये पॉइंट्स जो लगे हुए हैं ये समझने कि ईच इंडिविजुअल. ओके. Each individual presented by a single point in the graph, so that the horizontal position corresponds to the individual's x value and the vertical position corresponds to y value. The values of the scatter plot is that it allows us to see any pattern or the trend that exists in the data set. This scatter plot is showing the relationship between the grades exam, and the time needed to complete the exam. Notice the general trend in these data. Students who finish the exam early tend to have better grades. It's mean अगर हम टाइम बढ़ाते हैं तो स्कोर कम हो जाता है, और अगर हम टाइम कम रखते हैं तो स्कोर ज़्यादा हो जाता है. तो ये इस किस्म का रिलेशनशिप इस स्कैटर प्लॉट में दिखाई दे रहा है. तो इस स्कैटर प्लॉट से हमें जो इन्फॉर्मेशन मिलती है वो हमें एक अंदाज़ा मिलता है कि किस किस्म का रिलेशनशिप का रुझान पाया जाता है. रिलेशनशिप पॉजिटिव है, रिलेशनशिप नेगेटिव है, या रिलेशनशिप नहीं है. लेकिन हम इस स्कैटर प्लॉट से ना तो डेफिनेटली उसकी एक डेफिनेट अमाउंट या मैग्नीट्यूड मेजर नहीं कर सकते. स्कैटर प्लॉट में सिर्फ हम रिलेशनशिप को डिस्प्ले कर सकते हैं, और उस स्कैटर प्लॉट को देखकर सिर्फ अंदाज़ा लगाया जा सकता है कि रिलेशनशिप का पैटर्न क्या है इसके अंदर। Correlation as describing the relationship. A correlation typically evaluates three aspects of the relationship. The correlation is the numerical value that describe and measure the three characteristics of the relationship between X and Y. And these three characteristics are direction of the relationship, form of the relationship, and the degree of the relationship. We will discuss these characteristics of the relationship or the correlation uh, one by one. The direction of the relationship. The direction of relationship is measured by the sign of the correlation, that is positive and negative. These signs of the correlation, positive or negative, describe the direction of the relationship. A positive correlation means that the two variables tend to change in the same direction. As one increases, the other also tend to increase. In positive correlation, the two variables tend to change in the same direction. As the value of x variable increases from one individual to another, the y variable also tend to increase. When x variable decreases, the y variable also decreases. A negative correlation means that two variables tend to change in opposite direction. As one increases, the other tends to decrease. A negative correlation, actually two variables tend to go in opposite direction. As x variable increases, the y variable decreases. That is, it is an inverse relationship. In this scatter plot, two type of the relationship or two directions of the relationship are displayed. In this scatter plot, there is a positive relationship between two variables, and in this scatter plot there is a negative relationship between the two variables. इस स्कैटर प्लॉट में हम देखते हैं कि ये स्कैटर प्लॉट है बिटवीन द टेम्परेचर इन डिग्रीज। जैसे जैसे टेम्परेचर बढ़ता जाता है वैसे वैसे अमाउंट ऑफ बियर सोल्ड भी बढ़ती जाती है। इधर जैसे जैसे टेम्परेचर इंक्रीज होता जाता है, अमाउंट ऑफ कॉफ़ी सोल्ड जो है वो कम होती जाती है। यहाँ टेम्परेचर की इंक्रीज के साथ साथ इसकी सेल में भी इंक्रीजमेंट हो रही है, यानी एक चीज़ इंक्रीज हो रही है तो दूसरी चीज़ भी इंक्रीज हो रही है। इसकी टेम्परेचर के बढ़ने के साथ कॉफ़ी की सेल में कमी हो रही है, यानी इधर टेम्परेचर बढ़ता जाएगा, जितना टेम्परेचर बढ़ेगा उतनी कॉफ़ी की सेल कम हो जाएगी। ये नेगेटिव रिलेशनशिप है। तो पॉजिटिव रिलेशनशिप में जो लाइन है वो इस तरह से ग्राफिकल रिप्रेजेंटेशन करती है इस डायरेक्शन में, और नेगेटिव कोरिलेशन में जो पोजीशन है इस लाइन की वो इस तरह से होती है। Okay, next is the form of the relationship. The most common form of relationship is the straight line or the linear relationship, which is measured by Pearson correlation. ये जो है ये स्ट्रेट लाइन रिलेशनशिप है, लीनियर रिलेशनशिप, यानी जो डेटा पॉइंट्स हैं वो इस जो स्ट्रेट लाइन है इसके तकरीबन इर्द गिर्द ही हैं, बहुत दूर या स्कैटर्ड नहीं है बहुत दूर तक, और इसमें भी ऐसा ही है। तो समटाइम्स रिलेशनशिप इस किस्म का भी हो सकता है, तो इस किस्म की लाइन भी बन सकती है। तो लेकिन हमने को रिलेशन में जो है वो जो फॉर्म स्टडी करनी है, वो फॉर्म जो है वो है लीनियर रिलेशनशिप की। तो रिलेशनशिप इन दीज two scatter plots is a linear form, that is the points in the scatter plot tend to cluster around a straight line. We have drawn a line through the middle of the data points. देखिए कुछ डेटा पॉइंट्स इधर हैं और कुछ डेटा पॉइंट्स इधर हैं, तो हमने इस लाइन को क्या किया है, बिल्कुल तकरीबन कोई मिडल ऑफ द डेटा पॉइंट लगाया है. The most common use of correlation is to measure the straight line relationship, which we measure with the help of Pearson correlation. However, other types of forms are also exist. In this correlation, which we measure with the help of the Pearson correlation, is we will focus on the linear relationship or the straight line relationship. Third one is the degree of the relationship or the strength of the relationship. Degree or the strength of the relationship. The degree of the relationship or the strength or consistency of the relationship is measured by the numerical value of the correlation. A value of 1 indicates a perfect relationship, and a value of 0 indicates no relationship. The value near to 1, -1 or +1 indicates the strong relationship, and the value away from the 1 describing the low relationship or the weak relationship. For a linear relationship, for example, the data points could fit perfectly on the straight line. जैसा कि अभी पिछली एग्जाम्पल्स में हमने देखा है, बिल्कुल सीधी लाइन बन रही है. For each time x increases by 1 point, the value of y also changes by the consistent and predictable amount. However, the relationships are usually not perfect. Although there may be a tendency for the value of y to increase whenever x increases, the amount that y changes is not always the same. Occasionally, y decreases when x increases. In this situation, the data points do not fall perfectly on the straight line. Consistency or the strength of the relationship is measured by the numerical value of the correlation. As I earlier said, the perfect correlation always is identified by the correlation of 1 and indicates a perfectly consistent relationship. मतलब ये कि अगर हम x की अमाउंट को बढ़ाएंगे या घटाएंगे तो उसी लिहाज से जो y की वैल्यू है वो कंसिस्टेंटली बढ़ेगी या कम होगी. Each change in x is accompanied by a perfectly predictable change in y. At the other extreme, the correlation of 0 indicates, जैसे मैंने यहाँ बताया, indicates no consistency at all. For the correlation of 0, the data points are scattered randomly with no clear trend of a straight line. As in these two situations, डेटा जो है वो स्कैटर्ड है और इसमें कोई टेंडेंसी नहीं पाई जाती कि वो स्ट्रेट लाइन बनाए. इसमें पाई जाती है, ठीक है, कभी ज़्यादातर ऐसा ही हो रहा है कि एक्स की वैल्यू को चेंज करते हैं तो उसके साथ वाई की वैल्यू भी चेंज होती है, लेकिन यहाँ ऐसी कोई बात मौजूद नहीं है। तो ये डेटा बड़ा स्कैटर्ड पड़ा हुआ है और स्ट्रेट लाइन बनाने की टेंडेंसी इसमें कम है या बिल्कुल ही नहीं है, जबकि ये डेटा परफेक्ट कोरिलेशन बना रहा है, क्योंकि ये बिल्कुल परफेक्ट स्ट्रेट लाइन रिलेशनशिप है और इसमें भी रिलेशनशिप काफ़ी स्ट्रॉन्ग होगा, क्योंकि इसमें भी टेंडेंसी पाई जाती है एक स्ट्रेट लाइन बनाने की। The correlation of one indicates a perfectly consistent relationship, uh, whether it is positive one or the negative one. Similarly, the correlation of point 0.8 and positive or negative are equally consistent relationship. So we notice that the correlation can never be larger than +1 or smaller than -1. If your calculations produce a value outside this range, then you should realize immediately that you have made a mistake in the calculation. To compute our relationship, we need two scores, x and y, for each individual in the sample. The Pearson correlation requires that the scores be numerical value from an interval or the ratio scale of the measurement. Other correlation methods exist for the other scales of measurement. ऑर्डिनल के लिए हम रैंक कोरिलेशन इस्तेमाल करते हैं. The Pearson correlation measures the direction and the degree of linear or the straight line relationship between the two variables. Obviously, to compute the relationship, we must measure the variability x and y scores separately. Variability by computing the SS for the scores of each variable. SSX, sum of square of x and sum of square of y. So if there is perfect relationship between the two variables, then there must be co-variability exists between x and y together. Covariate x and y together. And if there is no zero correlation, then there will be no co-variability between the two variables. So first we have to calculate the amount of the variability which is found in the separate scores of x and separate score of y. Then we find the co-variability between the two variables with this formula. This formula, you are familiar with this formula to calculate how to calculate the sum of square or the variability or the squared deviation. This is the formula of square deviation. We have also learned a different formula for the squared deviation. This formula is also has been discussed in our previous lectures, and this formula may be new for you to some extent, in which we are measuring the co-variability between the two variables. When we calculate the separate variability between separately in the two variables and the covariability between the two variables, then we calculate the Pearson correlation with this formula. So we can say that the Pearson correlation is comparing the amount of covariability, the variation from the relationship between x and y uh, to the amount x and y vary separately. The magnitude of Pearson correlation ranges from 0, indicating the linear relationship between no linear, 0 होगा तो no linear relationship between the two, 1 indicating the perfect relationship between the x and the y. The one can be positive or negative. This correlation can be either positive or negative depending upon the direction of the relationship. We see the how the pattern of data points are on the scattered plot. The positive sign of the correlation indicates that the points are clustered around a line that slope up to the right. Okay, इसको हम graphically देखेंगे with the help of, ठीक है, ये राइट की तरफ बढ़ रही है, ठीक है, फ्रॉम द लेफ्ट. तो अगर पॉजिटिव रिलेशनशिप है, साइन पॉजिटिव है रिलेशनशिप का, that indicates the points are clustered around the line that slopes up to the right. Second, the high value for the correlation near to 1 indicates that the points are very tightly clustered close to the line. Thus, the value of the correlation describes the relationship that exists in that data. Because the Pearson correlation describes the pattern formed by the data points. Any factor that does not change the pattern or also does not change the correlation. Means adding a constant और सब्ट्रैक्टिंग और कांस्टेंट, बेशक हम उसे एडअप करें या हमें सब्ट्रैक्ट करें एक कांस्टेंट को, with each value of x or the value of y does not change the pattern of the data points and does not change the correlation. In the same way, multiplying or dividing each x or the y value by the positive constant does not change the pattern and does not change the value of the correlation. Multiplying by the negative constant, however, produce a mirror image of the pattern and therefore change the sign of the correlation. Now, because the Pearson correlation describes the pattern formed by the data points, any factor that does not change the pattern also does not change the correlation. For example, if 5 points were added to each of x value, then each data point would move to the right because all the data points shift to the right. The overall pattern is not changed, it is simply moved to the new location. Similarly, if 5 points are subtracted from the each x value, the pattern would shift to the left. In the other case, the overall pattern stay the same and the correlation is not changed. In the same way, adding a constant or subtracting a constant value from each value of y simply shift the pattern up or down. but does not change the pattern uh, and therefore does not change the correlation. Similarly, multiplying each x and y value by a positive constant also does not change the pattern formed by the data point and does not change the correlation. For example, if each of the x value are multiplied with the same value in say 5, then same scatter plot could be used to display uh, either the original scores or the new scores. A correlation measures the degree of relationship between the two variables on a scale from 0 to 1. Can also be negative. Although this number provide a measure of degree of relationship, many researchers prefer to square the correlation R square and use the resulting value to measure the strength of the relationship. The squared correlation measures the proportion of variability in data that is explained by the relationship between x and y. It is sometimes also called as coefficient of determination. आपको याद होगा कि हमने अफेक्ट साइज कैलकुलेट करने के लिए कौन डी के साथ आर स्क्वायर का एक फार्मूला और एक प्रोसेस भी सीखा है। तो रिसर्चर इसी तरह से इस आर स्क्वायर वैल्यू को रिलेशनशिप की स्ट्रेंथ को मेजर करने के लिए रिपोर्ट करते हैं और इसे हम कोफिशिएंट ऑफ डिटर्मिनेशन भी कहते हैं। Coefficient of determination, the value r square is called the coefficient of determination because it measures the proportion of variability in one variable that can be determined from the relationship with the other variable. A correlation of r uh, or plus or the minus 8, for example, means that r square value is 0.64, or if we multiply this value with 100, it will become the 64%. So the 64% of the variability in x score can be predicted from the relationship with y.